everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Journey Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany Avila. Today's guest went from starring in Annie on Broadway to being a yoga instructor to now being kind of a life career coach. And this conversation was just a lot of fun because we talked about everything from kind of the entertainment industry to finding balance in your life, time management. Who doesn't need better time management skills? We talked about kind of reaching states of creativity and flow. And our guest, Stacey Brass-Russell, even offers kind of some free coaching resources up on her website at staceybrassrussell.com/career journey for all listeners here. That'll be expanded at the end of the interview. And there's also links on all of our social media pages if you want to take advantage of those. I suggest so. I've looked at them. They're amazing. So yeah, without further ado, enjoy Stacey Brass-Russell. Hey everyone, welcome to the Career Journey Podcast, where we explore exciting careers and how to get them from the people who've lived it. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany Avila. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy.
So, I mean, you know, I come from a background of very entrepreneurial and creative. So, I wrote in my, in our, the form I filled out for you, that I'm someone who has really made it in like unusual, right? Like not the traditional path, like not the 9 to 5, but more, creating a career out of being a yoga teacher and then owning a business. And, and what I help a lot of my clients do is create content. I help other people take their expertise and really turn it into a way that they can offer it, as courses and programs. And, so really help people sort of figure out how they can market their skills and what they do. So,
yeah. And I think that's imperative nowadays because I feel like there is no traditional path anymore. I mean, we say go to college, get a job, but it still doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah.
And so I feel like everything's a little non-traditional. And I always tell my students, the greatest thing about going out into a career now in 2020 and beyond is you can really create a job if it doesn't exist. So if you want to do something and it's not there, now is like one of the best times in history where you can make it happen if you kind of know how to. So
exactly.
I'm very excited to hear your advice.
Okay, great. Cool. I my background, I try to bring everything forward. So I use a lot of yoga, techniques, and I'm very, very into helping people to really like raise their vibration and really kind of step into their higher selves so that when they're making choices and decisions about their career and their business and their work, that they're doing it from a place of, empowerment. So,
awesome.
So I have a great, I have things that I can offer for that.
Great. Yeah. And as somebody who teaches cognitive psych, we teach a lot about how meditation, yoga, mindfulness, all of that stuff, I mean, it increases everything, I think the research shows. But for us, it just increases even cognitive ability. So being able to retain information and work and time management and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And also to see yourself, if you're working with students that are trying to figure out like what they want to do or what direction they want to go in. I think having the ability to kind of visualize what you ultimately want is really important. I mean, like it's important to be able to like have an idea of what you'd like instead of kind of approaching it from I'll just see what happens, So
it's actually something I talk about in advising almost every week is students are like, but how do I figure that out? How do I know what I'm interested in? And, I think they come in with this mindset that you just have to kind of pick a job or you pick a career, and they don't think they can think about money or what they're passionate about or I tell students, just go onto your social media and see what you're gravitating towards even.
Yeah.
Like,
And lifestyle, I mean,
yeah,
like the way you were saying, you can create whatever you want now. I do think that there's so much, there's so much more possibility if you're someone who doesn't want to work, a 9 to 5 job. I mean,
right.
there's so much freedom available if you want to, so knowing what kind of lifestyle you want to live is really important so that you can make choices that will help you get to where you would like to be.
Yeah, and knowing if you want a boss or not. So if you wanna be the
Exactly.
boss or, someone like me, I actually really enjoy having somebody else be in charge and me kinda just fitting the bill of whatever they need, and then I have, people like my husband who hates that and does not like working for other people.
Yeah. Great.
Um, so we usually just start with the very beginning. Did you have any ideas of what you wanted to do when you were a child?
Well, I did actually because I, started taking dancing lessons at when I was 8, just like so many little girls. It was my after school activity. And I was actually just really really good at dancing, which was not something that wasn't the reason I went to the classes. We went just because it was the after school activity. And so when I was little, I was performing, I was on stage in the dance recitals. And at the time that I was that age, the Broadway show Annie had just opened,
Oh,
which
yeah.
was kind of like a monumental, life-changing, event for so many, not only little girls but boys and girls. I think I've come to know over the years of being in show business after that so many young people were influenced by Annie opening. It swept, the world. And so just like so many other little girls, I just decided I wanted to be an Annie. I used to listen to the album and sing along, and I was the driving force. My parents were sort of like, they really were not stage parents. They really had no idea what what it took to be in a Broadway show. But I kept saying, well, I want to do this and I want to do that. And my dancing teacher told me that there was a sleepaway summer camp that was for performing arts. And so
Oh,
I
wow.
told my parents that I wanted to go to that. And I went to that camp and I got a lot of attention there. I was very little and had a big voice, and I got a lot of attention. And that fall, I ended up again convincing my parents to take me in to meet with this children's talent manager. And we walked in and they said, "Oh, do you want to be in commercials?" And I said, "No, I just want to be an Annie." And they were like, "Oh, well,
Doesn't quite
well,
work
okay,
that way.
that's great." And a few months in, there was an audition that was a big audition for the first national tour of Annie. And so they called my parents and they said, "Well, you can bring her on this audition." And my parents said, "Well, we don't have any intention of going on a national tour." I mean, I had a
Yeah.
little brother and we lived in on Long Island, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It'll just be for the experience, because what are the chances that she would get, the first thing she ever auditioned for, basically."
Right.
And so my parents took me in and I made it all the way to like the last cut. There were hundreds of girls
Wow.
there. And then they sent us all home and we didn't hear anything. And 3 months later, they called my manager and said that there was an opening on Broadway and they wanted to see me for that. And I went in and I got it. And
Oh,
so
wow.
so I was cast in Annie when I was 10. And that was in 1979.
Oh,
And I
what
was
a
in the show for 2
story.
years. Yeah.
What a way to make your dream happen. I like
Yeah, so
that.
I did actually know what I wanted to do when I was little. And for most of my early life and my teenage years and in my early 20s, I never even considered that I would do anything else. I mean, that was really just my trajectory. I went to NYU for theater, and in my mind, that was just what I was going to do. So, yeah, very early focus.
Right. And what was it like, achieving that dream and being an Annie?
It was really wonderful. I feel like we had a very, very special experience. The show, obviously, it was kind of like, if you think about if anybody is into theater, if you think about what Hamilton is like now, that's what Annie was like. It was like the hardest ticket, and all the celebrities came to the show, and we were treated really well. And this was before there were any child labor laws. I mean, Annie was one of the first shows that had a significant amount of little kids in the show. So there were 8 of us, and there was Annie, the orphans, and then an understudy, and we did all 8 shows a week. I mean, we there was no double casting, there was no different treatment for the little kids. So I worked full time for 2 years. It was really exciting. By the time I left, though, truth be told, I was tired, and I also was about to turn 13, and a lot of my friends were having bar and bat mitzvahs that I couldn't go to because I had shows, and I started to say to my parents, I think I want to be a kid, and so I left, and I kind of did that and did local stuff. And then when I was in my around 15, 16, I started going into, because I was very fortunate, I lived close to Manhattan, where obviously there was a big plus there. So I was able to come in and out of the city and continue to take dance class, and I really got to be a part of the New York City theater scene. And then I went to NYU. So, I took a little bit of a break from pursuing a lot of professional stuff just for a couple of years. And then once I was more independent, I really started, coming into the city and doing it on my own again.
And when you made the decision to leave Annie, was that your decision? Was it kind of your time had expired? Did you come to it on your own?
I was getting a little tall. There was definitely a height. They didn't want orphans that started to look like they were teenagers.
Right.
But it was my own decision. I was a valued orphan member because I had the ability to know all of the parts. When I first was cast in the show, I was the understudy for all of the orphans before I became a permanent role. And, it's not easy to know multiple roles, multiple different, choreography and tracks and staging. And so I was definitely a very valued commodity because I was able to they call it swing. I was able to swing into different parts if I needed to. So, they weren't pushing me out of the show, but it was a mutual understanding that it was time. I was definitely getting more sick, get more susceptible to getting colds, and I was run down. I mean, it's a big schedule for a 12-year-old.
Well, I've heard that from adults that are on Broadway, that they get more sick, that they are tired. So I couldn't imagine.
Yeah. I mean, you really have to take care of yourself as you're an instrument when you're an actor, a performer. And, I took care of, my parents made sure I took care of myself, but no matter what, I went to bed at, 11:30, 12 o'clock at night every night. I mean, most 11 or 12-year-olds are not staying up, until midnight. And, it's just it's a definite unusual schedule, the nightlife, so I'm a night owl. I've never been someone who goes to bed particularly early, or I don't really enjoy waking up very early, even though I do wake up every day. But I've always marveled at people that thrive on, that pop out of bed at, 5:30 in the morning. And I actually have wondered a lot in the last few years, whether or not it's something that's really a part of who you are, or whether that was like my whole idea of being like a night owl. Like it really started when I was 10.
So. Yeah. There's actually research on kind of these circadian rhythms, at least in psychology, and they definitely seem to be innate at some level, that different people fall into the different categories. And the biggest thing that they're finding now is just productivity is higher when you lean into whichever mode you are. So if you're a morning person, if you can make that work for you, if you're a night person, if you can make that work for you, it's better. And I think that might be one of the like side effects of COVID that might be actually beneficial is if we're restructuring the workplace, it'd be beneficial for us to think about people's kind of circadian rhythms and lean into when they are most productive to get better results and make people happier.
I completely agree with that. And, I have really tried to, I've been a yoga teacher and a wellness professional. And, there have been many reasons for me to explore waking up really early, that when I first started teaching yoga, which we haven't even talked about yet, when I first started teaching yoga, one of the things that when you first start, you kind of are excited to get offered any class that they'll give you, right? Like you're looking for classes, you want to build your schedule. And so of course the classes that you get offered when you're brand new are like the ones at 6 o'clock in the morning, like for the like really, really, hardcore gym people that want to go do their workout before work. And, so for like a year and a half or 2 years, I taught these 6:15 in the morning classes at a gym in New York City. And I mean, it was excruciating for me. And, and I tried to really embrace, that like I really, really tried. And look, I did it and I was never late and I never didn't show up, but it never became easy or comfortable or, I never got into feeling like, wow, this is great. It was always against the natural order for me. So, I really agree with what you're saying, I think. And I also think that we do all get to figure out, what, like for me, for example, when you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, it's so interesting. Like I need to start my work day later because I really don't feel like energetically ready to do certain things until between 8 and 9. And so that's when I like to do my exercise. So if I like do my exercise, my yoga, and I do my kind of high vibration routine and whatever, I'm really ready for like other people. More like around 11, and I kind of need my morning. Whereas if I make commitments at 9 in the morning, I regret it because I lose my time because I'm not going to get up at 6 in the morning to do, my exercise or my yoga or whatever.
Well, and it's one thing we stress in education, just trying to help students study better, is we tell them to look at yourself and figure out what times work best for you. Like you mentioned, we do this in exercise. I know I have to exercise first thing in the morning, and I happen to be a morning person. So this is like 5 a.m. If I don't do it at that time, the likelihood I'll do it later in the day is slim to none. But then, the person that I follow who creates the exercises, she works out at like 2 p.m. is like her best time. And
right.
I'm like, oh, that sounds horrible to me. But we all have these different rhythms, and it's even shown for like high school students and elementary school students and middle school that we start school too early for them because this also changes during different life stages as well. And a lot of teenagers happen to be more nocturnal and more night people. And so we force them to go to bed too early and we force them to wake up too early. And there's a whole push to try to get school days to start later so that students are actually awake and more in tune and all of that.
Well, before you said in tune, what I was thinking was how important it is I think, to teach, young people, to teach, even as early as elementary school, but definitely teenagers and college age students that, before you go out into your day and start kind of having to use your brain on, maybe like much more kind of focused intellectual activity, or when you're in the workforce, like before you're engaging with other people, I really think that we always need to have time to kind of like get into our ourselves to, I think that your creativity, which so many people, I think that so many people think that they're stuck, for example, or they think that their creativity is stuck, when really all it is that we actually have to like kind of wake our creativity up. We have to, breathe. We have to be in touch with our life force, and we need time to do that every day. We don't just wake up in alignment,
Right.
and so if you're waking up and you're in a rush to have to already be, obligated to using your brain a certain way, or to other people, or to, be on the go, and you skip that sort of connection to self time, you do feel like you're not creative. You do feel, disconnected from, from your, even just your intuition. And, we all have a very high degree of intelligence that doesn't require any outside information,
Right.
like we all have an intuitive intelligence, and you just have to be connected to it. But if you go out into the world and you try to do stuff without being connected to that, you can really feel off.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a while. I know as a writer, we talk about flow states a lot, which doesn't just exist in writing, it exists in everything. And it takes so long to get into that flow state sometimes, and you have to kind of block out the time on your calendar and make sure that nobody can penetrate that precious time. Like I was just thinking right before we came on here how I need one whole day without a meeting.
Yeah.
No students, no meetings, no faculty. Like I just need one whole day to just sit and get into that flow state and just catch up on everything else. And we need more of that.
Well, when you're a creative, when what you do is, like you said, writing, or, I create so much content. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I create courses. I do workshops, and in order to like even just write up the description of something, let alone create the content and create the, what you're actually going to be offering. You need uninterrupted time, and I have found that if I leave myself blocks of time in between clients, for example, sometimes it's not enough, because it's shifting gears in,
Exactly.
it's shifting your brain gear, and it takes time to go from, that outgoing brain, into where you need to be connected to your creativity and to be in flow, like you said. So yeah, I agree. I've really, really tried to, I've tried to create certain days in my week where I don't schedule clients and stuff, so that I call it behind the scenes, behind the scenes days, where I just know I need to have time to just work on stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I started doing just this semester, was creating some days where there aren't any kind of student meetings. Unfortunately, it's been a crazy semester, so they've kind of crept into those times.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But, okay, so that was a wonderful detour. I want to kind of back up where we were on your story. You mentioned that you went to NYU to study theater. How did you decide to do that?
So, for me, because I had already, started my career in show business, and, it's funny, not that I thought, oh, if someone offers me a movie, I'm not going to take it, but I always saw myself as a theater person. That was kind of my trajectory. I was a singer, dancer. And so, I really wanted to go to university. I was also an honor student, and, very, very always in like accelerated classes and stuff. And so I didn't want to go to a conservatory, even though I really wanted to major in the arts and theater. I didn't want to go to a school that didn't also have, that wasn't reputable for their academics. And so I picked NYU because it was in New York, and I knew I wouldn't have to, put my whole career on total hold. And also, it wasn't a conservatory. I could have looked at Juilliard, or, there were schools outside of the city like Carnegie Mellon, or, there were other schools that had good theater programs, but I felt like NYU at that time had the reputation for being, kind of strong in both areas. And so that was I only applied to NYU. I applied early. I know now they call it something else, but when I was going to school in 1986, it was, we applied early. And if you got in early decision, that was, where you went. And I only applied to NYU. So, so I went to NYU, and I think a big part of my story is, my career story is the fact that, when I was a sophomore in college, my father actually passed away unexpectedly. And it took a few years for things for the financial situation to really unfold, but it kind of was an immediate thing that my family's, our income was greatly impacted immediately. And NYU is not an inexpensive school. And so, I was in school, but it was I knew it was challenging. I knew that it was challenging for my mom to keep up with NYU. And then I ended up getting cast in a show, a really, really great opportunity at the Public Theater in New York right before my senior year. And it really felt like the right thing was to do this show and take a leave of absence. And so I did this show. I went on leave of absence, and I took off my whole senior year basically, and I had the intention of going back. And what's really interesting, I'd love to share this with your audience, is that year that I took off, I felt like when I was getting ready to go back, I felt like I had so much more clarity about how to make the most of my senior year. I really, really got more excited about going back, and I had this idea to kind of like make my own, sort of design my own year type of a thing, because I had this really amazing experience working at the Public Theater in New York, which is a really amazing institution, non-for-profit theater. And I came back, I was ready to come back and like kind of had this idea that I wanted to go into, understand more about producing. And then I got cast in a Broadway show. And so I did another Broadway show, and by the time that was over, there was no way I could go back to NYU financially. There was no way. My mom at that point had my father's business she couldn't keep it. It just, things didn't, the trajectory was not great financially. And so I wasn't able to go back to school. And so my professional acting career just kind of like kept going from there. And a little while later, when I went back and kind of asked NYU, like if they could figure out how I might be able to come back or use some life experience credits. I mean, here I was like a theater major with tons of credits now,
Right.
I was like, can you give me some credits? And they didn't make it easy. And then eventually I just moved on. So that's my story of my college story.
I do love what you said about taking that year and then having clarity, because I am a major proponent of gap years. I know that there's even companies out there now that support financially for students to take gap years and do something kind of productive with them and learn and from experience, because I am 100% of the belief that experience is just as valuable, if not more valuable, of a learning tool than just content in a course.
I completely agree. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And, not that I wouldn't have gone back, and, I've gotten a lot of other, I'm a learner. So, meaning I always am doing things to, to continue I've done so many courses and certifications, and, I feel like I have so many, I'm someone who believes in just consistently up-leveling my, my knowledge and my skills. And so it's not to say that I wouldn't have finished at NYU, but I definitely know that had I gone back, that year would have made a huge difference in terms of even just my appreciation of, how I could utilize the offerings. I think that like even the way I would have chosen the courses that I would have taken would have absolutely been completely different than had I just gone straight through.
Right.
What I would have realized would have been more interesting to me, and what I could have used, in terms of, my converting that over into work. For so many reasons, I think I would have made different choices in that last year.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's hard for a lot of students is I get asked all the time, well, what courses am I supposed to take? How am I supposed to build this? And we actually make students work backwards. So tell me what job you want. That's how you're going to pick your extracurricular experiences. That's how you're like, what does that job want of you? Build your life that way. But there's a lot of students that don't fully know what they want to do. I was definitely one of them. I switched paths a million times too. And it's hard to kind of build your experiences that way. And I think that's something that you're saying, kind of that gap year, taking a year to really focus on what matters to you could potentially help you figure out just those decisions.
Absolutely. And I definitely look, I know that I'm not the norm when it comes to, having entered my freshman year of college with this, very, very, focus, like I'm going to be a professional actress. I don't think the majority of, none of my friends that I grew up with went into their freshman year of college knowing exactly what they were going to do. And I think hardly any of them are doing what they thought they were going to college for, to be honest with you. I mean, all of my friends have in some way like kind of taken, and this is where I was going with what I was saying, is I think that like one of the things that we need to do and need to encourage our young people, college students, to do is trust their interests. Like I think that like nurturing your passions, nurturing what you really love. I mean, I'm going to actually go out on a limb and say even like video games, like it's kind of like looking at why you love what you love or what you love about it can tell you so much about like where your strengths are or what are you really interested in, around a certain topic, like something that you've just always loved your whole life. Like, how does it become something that you get to include in the kind of work you ultimately do, and like I know so many people who love the arts and theater, but never felt like they were the people to be on stage. And yet there's so many other ways that you can explore, being, including that or having that be something that influences and is a part of why you're so good at what you do, and I think it's something that is often overlooked and not encouraged.
I absolutely love that because I think breaking it down to what do you love about that thing, right? So you mentioned like video games. One, there's a ton of careers in video games and different ways to make that a career. And then two, okay, well, maybe you don't want to be in the video game industry, but what about the video games? Is it the problem solving? Is it, the maze type of like figuring out how to get to an answer? That can be seen in a ton of different careers.
Exactly.
Or, what you were saying about acting. I wanted to be an actress when I was younger, and I didn't think that I could handle that world, like the rejection, the whole kind of all of it. And I wish I would have known that exact thing because I could have potentially went still into that world and still done a career within that world to stay next to it, but maybe not be that major actor, the A-list actor, or whatever you kind of dream of when you're like 5. And I'm a testament to, I am not doing anything close to what I thought I was going to do when I entered college. And I think that's very common. And so knowing that your path can change and that you're kind of in control of it is something that we definitely need to start talking more about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when people ask me what I do, I say I'm an evolution coach. And they'll say, what is that? And the reason I call myself an evolution coach is because I think that there's too much emphasis or feeling around the idea that if you change your plan, like if you change the trajectory, that somehow it means that you couldn't do the other thing well, or that you failed at it. And, and I'm a perfect example of someone who, I was on Broadway, and that's pretty successful. That's not in any way like a failed actor. But, I got to a point in my adult life in my 30s where there were numerous factors. We had a strike in the Screen Actors Guild at one point, and I was one of the fortunate people who I happened to book a lot of commercials and voiceovers when I wasn't in a theater job. And that was a really great way to make money when I wasn't like on stage, and when that was on strike for a long time, we had a long strike, and that went away. I had to start making money waiting tables, which I hadn't really had to do for, that's the more stereotypical thing. And I hadn't really had to do it. And so here I was, I find myself cater waitering and, working a lot as a server, because also I didn't want to go out of town as much. And, I had been working in a lot of regional theaters, and I knew that if I didn't stick around New York, I wouldn't be able to be there when there was an audition for a Broadway show. If you're always out of town, you miss the auditions for like the big stuff. So, here I was, I'm in New York, and I'm waiting tables. And this is something I talk about a lot too. I'm like, when you're a creative, resourceful person, you're always good at whatever you do, right? So even if you're like waiting tables, all of a sudden you become the event manager. You keep getting more responsibility because everyone trusts you. You're smart and you're good. And so here I was, like, running weddings, and I was like, this isn't feeling good to me. And I had started practicing yoga, and basically at the place I was a yoga student, they were about to start a yoga teacher training, and they were like, you should do the teacher training, you'd be such a good teacher, because to be a teacher you have to be kind of a performer, like you have to be charismatic and be able to kind of like hold the room. And I was like, maybe I should do that. That would be a great way for me to make money when I'm not acting. So when I first, did my yoga teacher training, it wasn't because I was quitting acting. It was because I thought, oh, this will be a great, better money job for me than waiting tables. It'll be more fulfilling. I'll enjoy it more. And so I did my teacher training. I started teaching yoga, and I got a lot of classes right off the bat. I became popular pretty quickly. And all of a sudden, I was making money and paying off my student loans and starting to actually get out of debt, and actually was able to like kind of get a lease on an apartment for the first time instead of living in sublets. And so all of these things were happening. And then before you know it, I'm teaching yoga full time.
Yeah.
And then I had the opportunity to open a yoga studio. So, as these, kind of transitions were happening, it wasn't like I was failing at anything, but I was kind of like evolving and taking my skills and what felt right in the moment, and kind of, doing the next thing that was presented to me. And I feel that that's a really important thing to look at in our lives, that we kind of get to evolve. We get to sort of like ask ourselves, is where I am now still what feels like the best place for me? And when we're not saying yes anymore, we have to be willing to be open to like seeing what opportunity is there in front of us, saying, hey, now this is here. And, I think it's really important to encourage ourselves and our college student. This is what I do. I help people to embrace knowing that it's okay to decide that you might have been really great and loved this one job or career or profession that you had for 10 years. And when something inside of you, the voice inside of you is telling you, for whatever reason, it's no longer satisfying you, it's no longer fulfilling, it's no longer a positive environment, you don't want to work for anybody anymore, you want more money, you want to be using different skills, you get to do that. And it doesn't mean that you've, that was like a blip, or that was a failed time in your career or anything.
Right. And I love it brings it back to the importance of figuring out those minute details of what you enjoy, what skills you're good at, because those translate, like you were saying, even in waiting tables, you found how kind of acting and intelligence and creativity and all of that stuff that you kind of have valued made you better at that job, and it made you better at being a yoga instructor. And so it's really this core set of what you really, really want to do. And that can morph into different shapes and different forms. It doesn't have to be, in mine. So I'm in psychology, and a lot of students are like, I just want to help people. There's so many different ways to manifest that it, you don't have to just take one trajectory. You can do a wide variety of things to accomplish that same passion.
And use your skills, So, I mean, it took me a little bit of time to sort of, you also accumulate data, I call it. You accumulate data on yourself, right? It's sort of like as you go along, you find out more information, so data is something you can't force it, but like the more you do things, the more you accumulate that information. And one of the things that really emerged for me when I really look back, it's not like I have these random, careers of acting to yoga to business owner to coach. When you look at all of the things that I've done, there are some really key, there's some key things that are the thread between everything, which is I am a reverse engineering specialist and an organizational, I'm a strategist.
I love organization.
But it's sort of like when you think about like memorizing blocking or choreography or line, understanding when you're in a play or a show, there's an outcome, right? There's going to be an outcome. That's the end of the play, and everything leads to that, and when you take a yoga class, hopefully the teacher has put it together in such a way that what you're doing with your body is leading to something that makes sense. Otherwise you're going to get hurt,
Yeah.
And so and even like when I was working in restaurants and everyone was like, oh, run these events. It was because I'm a reverse engineer. I'm like, oh, if we we need to be here at this time for this, part of the party. If we're serving dinner at 8, it means that we have to have this first and this first, and so I've learned that strategy and reverse engineering and kind of using my Virgo brain are, that has been a through line for me. This is not like some, I'm not a business strategist now for creatives because I was, sitting and racking my brain, like, what should I do now that I'm 50? You know what I mean? Like that was not what happened. It was like, this has been the natural progression of me consistently, using what is natural to me and my gifts. And, this is something that comes up a lot also with the people I work with, which is when you have natural talent, natural affinity, natural gifts, it's okay to use those things. Like you're not less, I don't know how to explain it. I feel like sometimes I work with people and I have to say to them, it's okay that you didn't go to college for that.
Right.
It's okay. Like you're allowed to get paid for that because you're naturally gifted at it. It's okay that you don't have a degree in that. It's really fine. Like no one's going to call you out or tell you you're an imposter if you can deliver. Like if you're good at what you do,
you're good at what you do.
Exactly. And I think that's a really interesting thing to help people to feel and see, that you should be looking at what are your innate natural, like what are you designed to do?
And I think that's really good for our younger listeners too, because students, I think, sometimes lack the ability to really praise themselves for these types of things. Like my students are amazing people who have these full lives and can do incredible things that I could never dream of doing. But they often still feel, I guess, not good enough or not ready or whatever they're kind of feeling because they're young and they're still in college and, well, I can't possibly do this. And I'm like, you definitely could. Like, you're better at this than I am. Like I have a ton of students who are better writers than I am or who are better researchers than I am. And I wish that they would notice that, like, you don't need to be told like when is your time. you get to make your time. And sometimes that time is before you think, like it's before
or
you
before
graduate or
before it's sort of like the more, kind of,
accepted.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I totally agree. I also think, I mean, we all come from different, we all come from different environments, and I've always said, I know how lucky I was that I grew up in a household where, no one ever said to me, oh, that's crazy. You can't be an Annie. That's for like
Right.
special, super talented Broadway kids,
Only
like
1% of people get into that. Yeah.
exactly. Like, so no one ever said that to me, and I was very lucky. I mean, I grew up with parents that basically were like, you can do anything. And, one of the things that I kind of say a lot that I help people do is I say, I help people say yes before they know how. And
Yeah.
I think that that's something that is kind of worth looking at, this kind of, like you said, the I'll be ready when syndrome, or like, I'm
Mhm.
not allowed to, say that I do that until X, or,
Yeah.
look, I do think some things you shouldn't say you can do if you didn't like you shouldn't. I've always said, like, look, I don't think you should teach yoga if you didn't do a yoga teacher training. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? But
exactly.
but I do think that there's something to be said for, um, you know, kind of we have to step outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
We have to do things before we think we're ready. There was this great kind of motivational teacher named Sean Stevenson who passed away last year, and I got to see him speak a couple of times live. And he was born with a congenital, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was born with a very, very rare disease where your bones are so fragile that, even coming out of the birth canal, he was like half the bones in his body were broken. And so he was in a wheelchair, in a very deformed physical body. And he became a very, very, very popular motivational speaker. He was really funny. And his whole mission was to help people with their confidence, because he was this like outgoing, really, really confident, person in this body that was just completely, misshapen. And I got to see him live a few times. And one time someone raised their hand and said, what do you recommend for, building confidence? And he said, you can't build your confidence. Confidence is a byproduct of doing the things that scare you. He was like, so the only way you can build your confidence is to step outside your comfort zone and to take the risks and do the things that like you don't actually feel like you're going to be good at necessarily, or the
Yeah.
things that scare you. And that it was such an amazing, clear way for, of describing what we do have to do in order to, kind of build our confidence levels and to get to see ourselves, doing the things that we really want to do. We have to be supported to do those things, even if we're not sure what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
And it takes great support.
And knowing that this imposter syndrome doesn't go away and it's at the highest level. So I always thought, well, once I get, my PhD and they call me doctor, certainly I'll be confident. And now, like, you just have new excuses. Oh, well, these other people that have been doing this for a long time, or they've written a book on this. There's no way I can know what I'm doing. Oh, this person's so much smarter than me. It still happens. And I think that's been my greatest asset, is knowing that it happens at every stage, and even to those people that I'm admiring. And therefore, we kind of just have to tuck it under the rug and keep going regardless of it.
Well, I think when what you do is, when you're a teacher, or you're a guide, a counselor, you're a guide, you're someone who, you're kind of like out there helping other people. I think a really important thing that I have always, tried to tell myself, and I tell this to the, hundreds of yoga teachers actually that I've trained, and now I mentor so many coaches, is information. Yeah, it's important that we have scholars that can, give us information. But for a lot of us, our job is not necessarily to have more information. Our job is to basically share that information through our unique lens and through our unique experience, so that the people that are going to resonate with us and learn from us are the one are going to hear it, and not everybody is for everyone. And this is a really important thing about sort of owning your authenticity, and kind of seeing that a really big part of being successful in any career is that what you are doing is you are filtering that information or that guidance through your unique perspective, and really trusting that that's valuable, and that's worth putting out into the world is really important. So information only takes you so far. It's really your willingness to kind of trust that someone needs to hear what you're sharing in the way only you can share it.
That's great. So let's back up one more time, just a little bit, to you started to become a yoga teacher. How did you get from there to now coaching or being an evolution coach?
Yeah. So when I was teaching, about 10 years into being a teacher, I had the opportunity, a student, this was actually, well, it was a little less than 10 years, maybe 7-8 years into teaching. One of my regular students was, during the financial crisis, actually, in 2008, he had lost his job and he was a finance guy. And he decided to kind of, do this new thing and invest in opening a yoga studio. And so I had this opportunity to open a studio, and I did that. And about 7-8 years into that, it was just, owning a small business with 3 people as the owners, partners. It was very difficult to kind of see a path forward of really making any significant, like making a living was hard. It was difficult. And so I wasn't feeling super fulfilled, to be honest with you. And I had never made the decision to sort of like, never want to sing again or never want to do anything, related to arts or whatever. And so I just started thinking, what might be next for me? How could I continue evolving? Like, not that I want to throw out all of my 20 years of yoga, scholar, like being a scholar and a philosophy. Yoga is a philosophy and a brain science, and that's as much as the asana as the poses. That's where what I had been studying, and spirituality. I was like, what can I do to take all of that plus my sort of leadership? I've always been sort of like a thought leader, and use my my voice, and I just, someone else invited me to do a coaching thing that she was doing for free. She offered for me to be in her group thing. And 2 weeks in, I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be coaching people. And so I invested in my coaching certification, and I exited my partnership from the yoga studio. And, I went on a full solo entrepreneurial journey at that time. And I thought, I'm going to create a business. And, I became a health coach first, and then a life coach. And then I did an advanced level of coaching and training. And just organically, I started attracting, of course, the people coming to me were the perfectly aligned, soul aligned clients that were creative, soulful, passionate people that, that either were yoga teachers or passionate yogis that really believed in kind of using the practices of yoga and meditation, to better their lives, and attracting people who were trying to change businesses and change careers, and a lot of people that wanted me to help them, figure out their message and their how to have a business, which was not what I thought originally.
Yeah.
And over time, it all just kind of like all the pieces came together of how I help other people, because I really am now using, I do a lot of Facebook lives and a lot of classes and workshops on, I was using the, Zoom and the internet for things before the pandemic,
Yeah.
so, but, I'm really using all of my kind of skills, at once. I'm using my yoga, I'm using my psychology and brain science, I'm using cosmology, I'm using connection to the universe, I'm helping people tune into themselves and strategize how they want to be in service. I help wellness professionals and creatives and other coaches and, people that really want to, to have impact and need some help sort of figuring out their message and how to package what they do. When you're an artist and a creative, I think that there's a lot of starving artist mindset that can set in, and a lot of kind of knowing that you're really great at doing what you do, but you don't really know how to get clients, for example.
Yeah.
And so I help people, do that. And it's all been a very interesting, organic, evolution, for me to get where I am. But this last transition from yoga studio owner to coach really came out of what I try to tell other people they should do. When you start feeling like things don't feel the way you want it to feel, I was like, wow, I'm going to be at that time. This was 2 years ago. I was like, I'm going to be turning 50, I want freedom. I wasn't feeling free. I was feeling like, because I had two business partners, I kind of felt like I couldn't really do I couldn't do certain things because they would be like, why aren't you focusing on the business? You know what I mean? Like I couldn't
Right.
I couldn't go work on some singing, or like do something creative. And just everything in my gut was telling me it's time to, to explore the next thing. And I want people to do that. It pains me when people are unhappy doing what they're doing what they do, and I really do. I understand, like, sometimes people have, certain obligations, you have kids, I know that it's not always possible to just like change your career, but I do think it's really important when we start getting that feeling that we need to figure something out, that we listen to it, and that we do take the time to explore. I wonder what I might be able to do next,
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. And then, just because we're coming up on time and I want to be mindful of your time, the last question I usually ask is, if you could kind of boil all of this down to one piece of advice for people either starting out or wanting to change or knowing that it's their time to move on, what is kind of your single piece of advice that you would give the most?
Well, well, I've kind of just said it. I mean, I do think, I really do think that it's really important to see change, whether it's change that is kind of bubbling up inside of you because something's telling you to make change, or if it's change that's kind of that's happened, like you lose a job, or, like something happens. We must see change as opportunity to evolve, because I really do believe that that's what we're designed to do. We're designed to evolve. And so seeing change as opportunity is really important. So my other biggest piece of advice, I kind of said it before too, is say yes. Say yes. There have been a lot of times when something was presented to me, like, do this yoga teacher training, open this studio, other things too, where in that moment, there was no part of me that knew how I was going to do that. I didn't know how to own a yoga studio. I didn't know how to start a coaching business and make six figures in 1 year. I didn't know how, but I believe that when opportunity is in front of us, we have to say yes. And we will always be able to figure out how.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And where can people find you? So I know we'll post the links on social media, but do you want to tell people where they can find you right now?
Yeah, so as I told you, I always love to give a special gift to an audience that took the time to listen to our conversation. So, and we'll post this, but on my website, which is www.staceybrass-russell, you'll see it in print, but STACEYBRASSRUSSELL.com/, and there'll just be a link for a career journey for this podcast. And when your listeners go there, when the lovely people here go there, I've got two awesome gifts for you. One is a meditation, which is what I call a morning expansion meditation. So we talked a lot about kind of how to get into your zone, how important it is. So there's a recorded meditation that all my clients use to kind of wake up and get into the zone. And then also I call it a soulful strategy map. So a lot of times I think that when we have big goals or, things that we're working toward, it can be overwhelming, to just kind of like know what you want, but not really know what you should do today to get there. So this is what I call a strategy map. I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of like a reverse engineering, nut. I really, really think it's important to have a way to strategize how we use our time and our energy. And so that's there too. It's a really great just sort of way to kind of look at what you want to do for the day and make some choices about what you'd like to set your intention on. So those two things will be there, and I think everyone will get a lot out of those things, actually.
Yeah, I can't wait to use them myself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast. It was great having you.
It was really great meeting you, Brittany. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Career Journey Podcast. Head over to our website at careerjourneypodcast.com for more information and the latest episodes. See you next time.